Be careful. After watching this video, you might be scared to look in the mirror.
You'll see yourself, but wrong.
The old man had warned as he handed them the key to the abandoned house.
If you're unlucky, your reflection might even follow you.
3 friends, eager for a thrill, laughed off the warning and dared each other to spend the night in the town's infamous abandoned mansion. The locals whispered about a mirror in the attic, a relic left by the last owner, a reclusive woman who'd vanished decades ago. They said that anyone who looked into it after midnight would see things that would haunt them forever. At exactly 12:01, they crept up to the attic. Their laughter faded as they reached the dusty, dark room. In the center stood the mirror, tall and imposing, covered in a torn, faded cloth. Their reflections stared back, but something was off. Each movement felt delayed, unnatural, as if the figures in the glass were waiting. And then one of them noticed a shadowy figure slowly appearing behind their reflections in the mirror. But when they turned, the attic was empty. Adam, the boldest of the 3, laughed nervously. "It's just a trick of the mind," he said, waving to his reflection to prove it was all in their heads. But the reflection didn't wave back. A low whisper echoed from the mirror, dark and pleading. "Help me, get out." Their reflections grinned with twisted, sinister smiles that no human could ever wear. And as they stared, the shadows seemed to stretch from the glass itself. Frozen in terror, they watched as the reflections moved closer to the surface of the mirror, reaching out as though they might break free. And just before they ran, they heard one last thing, a promise hissed from beyond the glass. "Run if you want, but I'll be right behind you." Frozen in shock and realizing they were in real danger, the friends stumbled back from the mirror, but the door to the attic was gone. Just a solid blank wall where they had entered moments before. Panic set in as they began banging against it, shouting for help. But then the lights dimmed, and a cold, oppressive silence filled the air. The old wooden floor creaked behind them. They turned back toward the mirror, and to their horror, their reflections had fully stepped out of the glass. They stood before them, twisted versions of themselves with faces slightly off-center, eyes cold and unnatural, like a puppet's, and mouths stretched into joyless grins. "You're not supposed to be here," one of the reflections whispered, a sickening hollow echo of their voices. "But now you'll never leave." The friends backed away slowly, but each step they took was mirrored by their reflections. Closer and closer, until the shadows seemed to merge with them, blurring the line between who was real and who wasn't. Then, the boldest friend, Adam, reached out to touch one of the reflections, desperate to prove this was all some twisted prank. But the moment his hand touched it, the reflection's face split into an even wider, unnatural grin, and Adam felt a sharp, freezing grip wrap around his arm, pulling him closer. The last thing the friends heard before everything went black was the final hiss from the mirror itself. Your turn now to watch from the other side. When the townspeople found the house the next day, the mirror sat in the attic, completely intact. And if anyone looked closely enough, they could just make out the faint, terrified faces of 3 figures trapped behind the glass, forever watching, silently screaming as their own reflections went out into the world in their place.